This video is the first video in a series that I'm creating for my SGD 239 Tech Art course. Part of the course is using the Unreal Engine 5 Shaders and Effects Cookbook, and I'm creating these videos as a companion for working through that book in lieu of doing live demonstrations, since working with Unreal and especially working with shaders means that there's going to be a lot of times where we're going to be waiting for computers to do things. And doing this in a method that you can work asynchronously from me doing a live demo means that you can work at your own pace and you can go back and rewatch things. So this is going to be a better format for learning this material. This video is going to be important because it will be your video showing you how to start labs and how to submit labs. So in the future, if you do need to refer back to this information, this would be the video that you're going to look at. So we are going to be working on the first lab, which it correlates to the chapter 1, Understanding Physically Based Rendering. I'm not going to go through the information in the book before or after, or sometimes in the middle of, going over like how, some more detailed about the technicalities of that. That is up to you to read in your own time and absorb that information. This is strictly to help you with interacting with Unreal and completing the shader parts of the book. So for instance, this particular chapter has an early part of it where they show you how to set up your scene, how to work with, some lighting and rendering, and that you'll have to read the book and work through on your own. Where I'm going to pick up is going to be when we start the area called working inside the material editor. So each week you will be given a new Unreal project to work in. So for instance, this week you were given a project called Chapter 1. This is the project you'll be working with this week and this week only. Next week, for the next chapter, I will give you a new Unreal project to work in. File management is going to be critical to make this work correctly, for me to be able to grade your projects, for you to be able to move content around. And the way that we're going to do this is every week when you're given the new project, when you open it up, you need to make a folder in your content directory that is your last name, first name. I have an example of this in the project you're getting this week, where, it's my name right here, Johnson Amber. And inside your folder, you need to save or create anything that is necessary to complete this project. So for instance, if you need to make a new material, you're going to save it in here. If you need to create a new texture, you would import it into this folder. I do recommend that you do use subfolders in here too. Like we could make a new folder for textures. You can make a new folder just for maps, or what do they call them in Unreal? Scenes? Maps? I can never remember. Levels, that's what they call them. We could call them levels. Or if you want to split them up more of per exercise, you could do it that way too. Because there will be multiple exercises that you need to do to follow along with this demo. And then for your lab assignment itself, you will be creating your own materials and textures and placing them in here. So it's very important that anything that you change, anything that you create, anything that you import goes into your folder, because this folder is what you will be submitting to me. And if you do not create it in the correct version of Unreal, I am not going to say which version I'm using in this video, since this is going to be used for multiple semesters. Most likely semesters in the future will be working with different versions, but make sure that you are working with the same version that you are given in class. And then you need to make that folder inside the content folder. Do not put it inside the assets folder. Do not put it inside the chapter 1 or anywhere else. It needs to go in the content folder. It is also important that you do not rename these folders after you are done and you're giving them to me. So if you realized you misnamed it, please open the project and change the name of the folder inside Unreal and not in a file explorer, or it could break a bunch of stuff. So let's get started. Each time, like each item that we work with is going to have usually a level associated with it. So for our first project, first thing we're going to be working on, we're not going to work on the 1-1 start. That is something I'm not covering in this video. That is something you'd have to look at on your own, and that deals with setting up your studio scene. We are going to start in the 1-2 start. The very first thing you need to do is, wait, hold on a second. I apologize. We're not doing 1-2 start. We're actually in 1-3 start. We can skip 1-2 start. The very first thing you need to do when you open up your scene, your level, is you immediately need to go to File, Save Current Level As, and you need to make sure that you're putting it in your folder. Do not save over it in the levels, like where you just opened it. You have to save it over into here and just call it 01, 03 and your last name. Because I'm not going to be taking all of your content, I'm just going to be taking what is in your folder. So we need to make sure that we are saving a copy of that into our folder. So this first material is going to be a very basic material. We're just going to do a solid plastic. So one tip I might give you with moving in this viewport, you can see that it is very small. So when we try to move the camera, it does move it kind of quick. So I am going to go to the speed of the camera and I'm going to drop it down a little bit so that I can move around my viewport a little bit easier. So let's create our first material. In your content browser, we're going to right click. Let me actually delete this out so you don't get confused. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose material. I'm going to name this material M_basic plastic. I can then double click on this to open it up and edit it. We're going to just do a very simple, like I said, very simple plastic where we just need to add some color information to this. So, and then we will add some roughness information afterwards. The way that we do this is, since it's just going to be solid colors, we're going to add a constant vector 3 node to the base color. To do this, we will just right click anywhere on the main graph and we'll start typing constant. And we can see we get some autocomplete options: constant, constant 2 vector, constant 3 vector, constant 4 vector. Since we are making a color with no alpha, we're going to choose the constant 3 vector. This is what we use to put color information in. I know it doesn't seem like the name constant goes with color, but the idea is that it has 3 pieces of information: R, G, and B. So we have a variable that's going to hold, one number for R, one number for G, one number for B. We don't need to try to figure out how to make a color by typing in those correct values. Instead, we can come over here and where it says constant, and there's this little black square. If we double click on it, we will open up a color picker. You can see that it's very obvious that this is what people use to do colors, because this is already kind of hooked up to this already. Let's go with kind of a nice yellow sort of color, because we're going to do like a yellow plastic. So I'm just going to kind of use the color picker to get to a nice yellow that I like. Then I'm going to click OK. And we can see that it appears here, but the color also appears here as well. Next, we need to hook this up to our actual material, which is right here. To do that, we're going to click and drag off of this top output, not the R, the G, or the B, but this is all of them together. This is the vector 3. And hook it into base color. We can see that our sphere updates, and we can get an idea of what this would look like in the viewport. If we're not too happy with this color, that's fine. We can always reselect that node, come over, and we can change that color right over here. So like, what if we wanted it to be a little bit more orangey, like a little bit more of like an orangey sort of plastic, like a golden? We can change it and it will update in our viewport on the left. One other nice thing to change on here would be to change that roughness. If you remember, roughness is how shiny or not shiny our object is. Right now, it doesn't look very plasticky. It just has a sort of generic base roughness. It's kind of shiny, but not shiny. Very similar to how we did our base color, we are going to do this with a constant, since it is just going to be one uniform roughness value. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to start typing constant, and this time I am going to choose a just a regular constant, not a 3 or a 2, since if you remember from previous classes, roughness is a gray scale value. It's black or it's white or it's some form of gray. So we don't need R, G, and B. We just need one value. If we do a roughness value over here on the left of 0.2 and then hook it up to our roughness, we should get a nice kind of shiny look to our material now that looks a lot closer to plastic. All right. This is all we're going to do with this material, so let's go ahead and apply it to our object. So first, let's make sure we save it by clicking the save icon. Then we're going to go back to our main editor. To apply it, we're just going to drag and drop it onto our cube. And if we rotate around, we should be able to see, our shiny plastic cube. So not too bad. Again, I do recommend that you finish reading along through the book. If you're not familiar with the material editor, it does go into much more detail about working with that window and explaining some of the areas a little bit better. All right, we're going to create a new material now, which is going to be our first PBR material. So we are working on the section called creating our first physically based material. We do need to add another cube to the scene, so I'm just going to quickly select this one. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it so that we have a second cube, so that we'll have another thing to apply our material to. So let's create our material. I'm going to right click in our content browser. I'm going to go to material, and I'm going to name this M_PBR_. Metal. I'm then going to double click it to open up the browser. I'm sorry, the editor. So I'm going to show you a few shortcut keys that are going to be really handy when you really get into making textures and materials in here. So there are a lot of instances where you're going to be creating constant vector 3s, constant vector 2s, constant vector 1s, or just constants. So rather than right-clicking and typing constant and locating those, instead, if you hold down the 3 key and then click anywhere in the viewport, on the graph, it will automatically create a constant vector 3. So we're going to need one of these, and we're going to hook this up to our base color. We're also going to need a constant, just a regular constant. Actually, we're going to need two regular constants. So I'm going to hold down the 1 key, click, hold down the 1 key again, and click a second time. This first one, we're going to hook up to our metallic. And then the second one, we're going to hook up to our roughness. So we are making a metal sort of texture. So let's just double check that we have the correct values. So our metallic should have a value of 1. So let's put 1 in there. And then our roughness is going to have a value of 0.2. Kind of like our other one. So notice it does look a little bit strange, and that is because we haven't assigned it a color value yet. The color of it can really kind of help determine what type of metal we have. So I do encourage you to kind of play around with it. Like what happens if we do a white color? We get kind of like this chrome sort of look to it. What if we do sort of a coppery color? Not to give it away, we get sort of like a copper looking or bronzy sort of looking one. Usually if we're doing something like a steel, even though it is really gray, sometimes giving it a ever so slight blue tint will help it. So you can notice it's just a little bit, it's not white, it's just a little bit blue. And this can kind of really help when you're making like a stainless steel sort of look. So let's go ahead and save and assign it to our cube. So I'm going to hit save, close it, and drop it on our new cube. Notice that we do get those nice reflections, since it is metallic, of the plastic cube in that metal cube. We can also see the nice wood grain reflecting into it too. So let's practice creating a material that uses a texture. So I'm going to create a new one by right-clicking, choosing material, and we're going to call this one M_PBR_wood. I'm then going to open this up, and instead of doing a constant 3 for that base color, instead I'm going to right-click. I'm going to start searching for texture. And what we're looking for is texture sample. So I'm going to select texture sample. This will allow us to use a text, like an image, like we're used to. We've done this a million times starting in 116, 114, and all your other classes that use 3D art, where we're going to, use an image in here on our object as a texture. So we're going to come over to the details pane over here. And we're going to go to this texture area. We're going to go to this drop down. And we are going to look for, let me see if I remember what it's called, T_wood_floor. And we're looking for this walnut, this diffuse walnut. And then we're going to hook it up. And we're going to do something a little bit different this time. You might notice that when you do create materials, you do get sort of like this base sort of shininess to this. And this is kind of like your base specular, where by default, it kind of adds a 0.5 value to this. And sometimes that's fine. But sometimes you do want to make it look a little bit more realistic. Specular is sort of the opposite of roughness, where 0 roughness means it's shiny, 1 roughness means it's matte. Specular is the opposite, where 0 means it's not shiny, and 1 means it's super shiny. We're going to utilize our diffuse texture though, and rather than make a new one, we're going to just hook the R channel from here into that specular spot, and it takes it down. And the nice thing too is we're getting some variation in it, if you can kind of tell. Should make it a little bit bigger. Based off of the R channel, so that it feels a little bit more natural than if we just had it be a solid color. The nice thing too is we are kind of saving a little bit where we're not importing in a whole nother texture into this material. We're utilizing part of one that we already imported. Let's go ahead and finish off this material by adding in a roughness map as well as a normal map. So we can do this by, we need to do 2 more texture samples, but rather than finding it, we could just select this node, hit Control D to copy, hit Control D to copy again, so we don't have to hunt for those. I'm then going to select this first one, and I'm going to go back to where we first selected that wood floor texture, and I'm going to choose the M, and I'm going to go to the third one, and this one I'm going to choose the normal. We can then hook up this one into our roughness. And then we can also hook our normal map into our normal. We're getting a very nice looking floor. So let's save this out and let's apply it to our floor so we can see our new stuff. So I'm going to hit save. Close this. I'm going to drop this on. And we can see how the light catches, you know, it's not even. We have some, you know, with using that specular and that roughness, we're getting variation in that, and it looks a lot more realistic. We're getting it reflected, and we have a really nice high-end looking scene. All right, let's keep on moving along. The next part, we do need to save this scene, so we've done a lot of work, so make sure you do save your scene. Since this counts for 3 of the materials we need to make, we do need to move on to the next map. So let's navigate to Levels, Chapter 1, and we need to open up the 0104 Start. First things first, let's save this. Let's do a save current level as, and this is going to be in that folder, Johnson. And we can begin. We are going to make a very simple glass shader for this glass. It's going to be very low weight. It's just going to be kind of a very easy one. And in future weeks, we're going to make a better glass shader. This one, again, it's going to be super lightweight. It's going to be super fast to make. It's not going to be a big burden on our system. The ones in future weeks are going to look very nice, but they're going to be very heavy. So it's kind of nice to know both of them, depending on the situation you're working in. So let's create our material. I'm going to right click in the content browser, choose material. I'm going to name this one M_simple glass. I'm going to then just apply it. Might as well while I'm here. To there, did it apply? Hold on. Yep, I think it did. Let's just double check. Yep, there it goes. I'm then going to double click on it to open up this. So since we are doing glass, we do need to change some details about it. If you come over to, if you have the material selected and you come over to the panel on the left, we're going to need to go underneath the material blend mode, and we're not going to be making an opaque material. Instead, we're going to be making a translucent material. So let's make sure that we change this. Otherwise, what we do will not work correctly. Next, we're going to scroll down and look for the translucency section, which is right here. And we need to change the volumetric non-directional to surface translucency volume. There we go. Next, we're going to actually use a constant 4 vector this time. So I'm going to hold 4 and click to create that, since we need the R, G, B, and then A for alpha channel, which is where we will control that transparency. So let's go over here and let's kind of set it to like a blue. It'll look nice. And we're going to click OK. And then for the alpha parameter down here, I just open it up by opening up this arrow. We don't want an alpha of 1, we want an alpha of 0.5. An alpha of 0.5 means that it's going to be slightly transparent, but not fully transparent. So let's hook this into our base color. And you can see that we're getting the color, but we're not getting that transparency yet. So in order to do this, we are going to pull another pin off of here and drop it somewhere empty so that we can create a new node. We are going to start typing component. And what we're looking for is this component mask. So we're going to click that. And from this drop down, we're going to uncheck our G and we're going to check A. And what this will allow us to do is turn this vector 4 into, just looking at that one channel. And we should then be able to pull this and drop it into our opacity. And we can see that we're now semi-transparent. We're then going to save this. And we can close this out and take a look at our glass. And it gets the job done. It's an okay glass. This would be acceptable in most video games. It's not doing any kind of crazy refraction, but it was super quick to make, and it's not going to be super heavy on our rendering pipeline. So make sure you do save this, and we are done with the glass material, I should say. So if you do look in the book, there are other things that we are not going to do in this tutorial video. I want to show you a couple extra things to give you something more to work with for the rest of the assignment. And it's kind of cool, kind of fun. So you should have downloaded with this lab, there should have been a zip attached to it that had 2 textures in it, Rainbow BC and Rainbow EM. So make sure you import those into your folder. The Rainbow BC base color is just a simple gradient rainbow, and Rainbow EM is going to be a mask. So what we're going to do is we are going to, and I'm actually going to switch back to, I think, the 03 one for this one. So let me save this one. I think it'll be more fun. Oops, let's save those. I think it'll be more fun in this scene. But if you're going to do this, make sure that you do duplicate your wood, because I do need to see that that is completed. And I'm going to just do it on this one. So we're going to make a new material called, I believe I asked you to call this one M_rainbow. I think that's what I asked. And let's apply it to the wood. And we're going to make a glowing, moving rainbow texture for this. Think about like maybe Rainbow Road from Mario Kart, something maybe that you would see in that kind of game. So I'm going to double click to go into here. We do need to bring in our texture coordinate so that we can put in that rainbow texture. So if you do have larger monitors, one thing you can do, I'm sorry, not texture coordinate, I added the wrong one. texture sample. There we go. That looks a little bit better. You know, drag and dropping works too. So if you have two monitors, this is why it's really handy to have two monitors. You can, rather than hunt, if you know right where it is, we can just drop it right in. So I'm going to hook this up to our base color. Oops, let's try it again. There we go. Hit apply. Not super exciting yet. Let's make it glow. So the way we can do this is by using this as our emissive. But, you know, it's kind of boring. Like, we can just drag and drop this into emissive. And, you know, it does glow, but it is going to glow kind of based off of, let's see, let me get to the Light Studio. And let's turn down the brightness so we can see it glowing. Whoa, not that far, just 0. Oh, hold on, I think I messed up. Gotta do that. Let's try global brightness, maybe. 1 second. Oh, I know what my problem is. I forgot to save it. Let me go back to the editor. I forgot to save it after I hooked that up, so I hit save real quick. There it goes. Now I see it glowing. Yeah, let's go and turn down the brightness. Light Studio. Will this just work? There we go. That's just the BP Light Studio. I turned the global brightness down to 0 so we can see that glowing. And note that we are getting that cool kind of reflection, but you know, it's kind of boring to me. Like, you know, let's try to make it a little bit more interesting. And that's where this rainbow EM mask comes in. So I can just actually drag and drop this in, you know, rather than having to type in that texture sample. Kind of a quick way to do it. Let me kind of squish some up. And we are going to use this kind of as a mask to kind of make it look more like a glowing, kind of almost like a stained glass sort of look. We're going to do this by multiplying this with this texture before it goes into the emissive. So I'm going to hold Control and delete and add in, then click on that and start typing multiply. Add a multiply node. We're going to multiply this into each other. Think of this almost as in Photoshop, what happens if you multiply something like this on top of a other image? What does it look like? The darkness stands out. So if we save this now, we're going to get kind of like, you know, it's only going to glow where we don't have those, where we don't have, you know, those dark lines. If you want further control of this, like maybe you want to control this a little bit further, we could do this too. I'm going to hold Control, pull, you know, click on this. I guess we can go it this way too. I'm going to add another multiply. Hook this into here. And out of here, I'm going to actually add a constant. So I'm going to hold 1 and click. If we save it as is, excuse me, it goes black because we are multiplying black on top of everything, so it's going to take it fully out. We can then come in here and tweak this manually, maybe like 0.5, and we'll get like a dimmer glow. We could even go the opposite way. Actually, I don't know if this would work. Probably not. Yeah, we can get back up to 1, but it won't work the other way. So if we want it to be just plain what strongest, it would be a 1. 0 would be nothing. Let me turn on our global brightness back to 1. You can kind of see it happening a little bit better this way because you can see how like the lines aren't actually black. It's just that's not where it's glowing. If you did want to add the black lines, you could honestly add a multiply off of here and multiply those together and hook those into the base color. Like, oh, actually, we could just do this. And now we have black lines. But I kind of like it like this. I like that better. And we now have our control. Because maybe we don't need it so bright. We just want it a little bit bright. So this is all well and good, but it is very static. It's not as dynamic as it could be. What if we wanted to have this scrolling, like, moving, again, think of Mario Kart, like it has lots of these bright, rainbowy, dynamic, moving textures on it. So why don't we make one ourselves? This is extremely easy. To do this, I'm going to right click over here and type Panner. And we are looking for this Panner node. I'm going to then hook this into UVs on both of them so that they go at the same time, and we can give it any speed that we want. So for instance, what if we set it at a speed of 1? Let's do 1 and 1. Save it. I don't know why it's not working in the viewport, but we can see it working in here. You see it's kind of going diagonal because it is moving on the X and Y coordinates. We could set 1 to 0. We can see it going that way. It's a little bit fast though. It's kind of breaking the texture. Let's slow it down. And you are going to get a little bit of ripping, and that's okay. If we zoom in, it looks a little bit better. Like a 0.05. It's moving a lot slower. So we can move in one direction. What if you wanted to move, ping pong back and forth? Like it goes, think about like ocean waves, like it goes in, goes out, goes in, goes out. What if we wanted something like that? We can do that by adding a couple more nodes off of this. We are going, oh, before I forget, we can always set this to -1. And we'll go the other way. So, don't think we're stuck in one direction. So what we're going to do to make this ping pong back and forth is we are going to create a sine wave. So I'm going to right click, do sine, just like from math. If you remember from math class, a sine wave is kind of one of those going up and down sort of loops. And let's see, I believe we need to hook this into speed, but we are going to get an error. The reason is we do need one more node for this to work. We need to pull off of here, and we need to put on a time node. So let's save it real quick. It's going to be probably, I think, a little bit crazy, but we can see. Probably not what we want. So what do we do to fix this? We are going to go to the sine, and we are going to change this number. So what happens if we bump it up to something like a 10? This is where experimentation is really helpful, of like, what is it actually doing? Maybe time wasn't right. Let's try, speed wasn't right. Let's try going to coordinates. Let's break this one off. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Let's try changing that period back down to 1. Oh my goodness. Something. Oh, I don't think it's coordinates. Maybe time? 1 second, hold on. I swear it was speed. All right, there's a bit of a jump there. Where I last left the video, my panning back and forth was not working. and I needed to take a break from it and do some research and figure out why something that's been working for years is suddenly not working. But you know, it's a good example of being a tech artist is you are where the fire has to stop. You are the one who has to figure out what did Unreal do that broke your shaders, and you have to figure out how to fix it. So I did figure out the problem. In this specific version of Unreal 5 that we're working in, they broke the time node that has been working for years. So we have to do a bit of a workaround in order to get the back and forth motion of this working. So let me jump into my shader and show you how to do this. So first things first, I figured out why it's not animating in here. The reason is because we need to go to this drop down and make sure real time is checked. Again, usually this is on by default. Maybe yours was, but for some reason mine wasn't. So that solves that problem. The panner, let me turn it back on. We kind of saw this earlier where we can kind of just go in one direction, but what we want to do is actually have it go kind of back and forth. So we do need to use that sine wave. So I'm going to place the sine wave. And we are going to use that time that we'd had. But the time node is currently broken. And if you do some Googling around, there's some other people who are complaining about it. So we get this result, and that's not what we want. We want a nice even back and forth. So how do we fix this? The problem is that the time node is going way too fast. So our sine is going way too fast. So mathematically, how can we slow this number down? We can do that by multiplying the number that's coming out of our sine by a really, really, really small number. And this will slow down the speed of our sine wave. So this is where having an understanding of math is really handy, so that if you know the problem, this is going too fast, how do we slow it down? We multiply it by a small decimal. So if we hook this into a multiply node, into our speed, and then we put, again, a really, really, really small number into b. In fact, let me just add that constant 1 by holding 1 and clicking. We don't want 0. We want something like 0.00001. And we can see we're now getting our back and forth. I don't like how it's kind of going diagonal. It makes sense why it is going diagonal for what we have set up, because we're putting both those numbers into our x and y coordinates. How do we fix this? We just need to make sure that we are feeding the number into here into either just the x or just the y speed. And we could do that by making a, let's see, sorry, a float 2, find the right one. Sorry, it is a make float 2. And we can feed this into the x and then feed this into the speed. And it'll then go in one direction. If we want it to go the other way, we can just feed it into the y and it'll go in that direction. We could even set up a whole nother sine system for one or the other. Excuse me. So like, if we feed them into both, we'll be getting that back and forth. But if we grab this, make a new, copy paste into here and change this value to maybe like a point, like a 5. It's going to move, in a slightly different direction. So it does have kind of a shorter, it goes back and forth kind of short, but you know, this should be able to get you started with, if we go back in here, actually, let me take off this one so we can watch it a little bit better. There we go. And we can just use, you know, messing with math, messing with how we're doing this to, you know, if we change the sign, what happens? It goes a little bit further. And this, you know, we can change the speed through this number then. So, you know, play around with how you're working with this sine wave to get things to move back and forth at different rates of speed, as well as, you know, the distance and stuff like that. Okay, so the last thing I want to do with this video is go over how to submit. Because remember, you have been saving everything into this folder called your last name, first name. You saved out all of your levels into that folder. You created all of your materials into here. Anything you imported in needs to be in this folder. So what you're going to do is, when you're done, we're going to double check that everything has been saved. So this is a really important step. Save everything. If you're not quite sure where this folder is, we can just right click on it and do show in Explorer if you don't want to hunt down where that is, and it pulls up where that is. Okay, now that I know where it is, I'm going to close Unreal. This is an important step. Please make sure you close it before you do this, just to make sure that you have saved everything. We're not accidentally writing to anything. We're good to go. Do not do this. Do not select it all in zip. You need to go up to the content level, find your folder, right click, and you need to zip that whole folder. Do not rename this. You have to have it named correctly in Unreal, but you need to zip that folder. The reason is when you look inside, I need to see that it is in this folder so that all of your stuff is in a folder named correctly. When I go to grade this, what I do is I download everyone's projects and I just extract to my, you know, my directory, my version of the chapter 1. I just extract them all into that content directory. So it has to be in the folder, or else it gets messed up with the file structure. So it is on you to make sure that you are giving a zip, that all of your items are in a folder named last name, first name, so that I can extract them correctly into my directory. That's it. Hopefully you had fun with this one. Make sure you look at the rest of the lab, so that you know what other materials you have to create on your own using the information I provided to you today. And I will see you in the next video.